Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the best Rangers podcast in town. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. We scream about the Rangers so that you don't have to. This is episode 67, live on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and we're available wherever you get your podcasts as well. We are rolling through division previews. We did it last year. We're doing it again for the 2023-24 season. As a reminder, we will do a Rangers-specific preview closer to the season. Last week, we did the Pacific. Now we're going to do the Central. But in a second here, because more importantly, Rangers news, Carl Hagelin a few days ago has announced his retirement from the NHL. Nick, a great Ranger, a serviceable Ranger that was traded for Emerson Edom, who did things, I think, as a Ranger. Maybe. I don't know.
He played less than 50 games as a Ranger, Emerson Edom, and they traded. That's besides the point. That entire period of time is the textbook definition. That is the reason the salary cap exists, to pinch good teams. So you lose guys like Hagelin, Strawman, Cam Talbot, those types of guys. The problem is you can trade them and get good returns. You don't have to trade them for bad returns, which is what the Rangers did in all of those cases. Like the best player they got out of the Cam Talbot trade was a draft pick they used to take, Ryan Gropp, who never made the NHL. So that time period was a very dark time. But Carl Hagelin, very good hockey player. 20 goals as a rookie, won the fastest skater contest that first season, I want to say 2010 or 11. Famously suspended 3 games for being third man in that fight against Ottawa, where Brian Boyle got his brains rearranged in the corner, but somehow Hagelin was the one who got a 3-game suspension for pulling someone off of a pile. Really, really good. Really to the type of player that good teams have somewhere in their lineup. Went on, he won a couple cups, had a really good run in Pittsburgh, playing with Phil Kessel and Nick Bonino. Really decorated player. I know I saw a crazy stat the other day that Carl Hagelin made the playoffs every year of his career and didn't get eliminated before the first round until 2019. That was the first time he ever got eliminated in the first round as a player. Really solid player. A good penalty killer, really fast. And it sucks he didn't get to retire on his own terms. And it's really crazy that he had to retire because of an injury. He got in practice. He caught a stick blade to an eye in practice, and that was it.
Yeah, he's one of those players that isn't going to be on the first line. He's not going to be a top 6 player, but he is exactly the kind of guy that every team needs on their bottom 6. He's a speedy player that knows what to do with the puck. He was always in the right spot at the exact opportunity where he needed to be. He was also very liked in the locker room. Like he was by all accounts a really good guy that people liked being around. He was a good teammate, a good player as well. And the Rangers needed him after they traded him. They got Emerson Edom for him, a guy who, like I said, did some cardio for the Rangers for a little bit, and then that was it. Like I understand that they needed to trade him for cap reasons. They could have, should have, would have.
19 games as a Ranger.
Yeah, that trade was awful for the Rangers at the time, and it only got worse as time went on. And Carl Hagelin, we wish you the best in retirement, and hope you. I don't know. Maybe he sticks around in the NHL in some capacity, maybe some player personnel role or something along those lines if he wants to do that. But he had a great career, and wish he had a longer 10 years Ranger.
Yeah, definitely. One last thing on Hagelin that always sticks in my mind. Remember when Tortorella said he sucks on the power play? That's why he doesn't play the power play?
Sure.
During a press conference after a playoff game when the Rangers power play went, back in the day when the Rangers not used to be able to not score on the power play in the playoffs versus now where they only score on the power play. Right. Back then, they would go 40 power play attempts and score once across 2
how the pendulum
series.
swings.
All the way back around. The market correction on the Rangers power play in the postseason, absolutely insane. Really solid career, nice resume. If he goes back to Sweden, really good college career, which is something a lot of people forget. Really good track record, 2 years at Michigan. But let's get on into the hockey part of the conversation today.
Yes, sir. We got the Central, which is very. I feel like this is the biggest Jekyll and Hyde division of them all, because there's some teams in there that are really scary, and then there's some teams that I feel like would be afraid of third graders.
I don't disagree with you. We'll start at the bottom. We're going reverse order like we did last week to keep it organized and to keep you watching the show, honestly, because if we start with Colorado, no one's going to stay until we're talking about the Blackhawks. So starting off rip, the Chicago Blackhawks, who picked first overall last year, They went 26, 49, and 7. They had 59 points last season. Their over-under total is 71.5. Last year, one of the most brazen tank jobs in the history of professional sports, not just the NHL. The Blackhawks assembled the worst roster humanly possible. We were talking about Jared Tenorti playing 44 games for them and how he's listed as a second-pair defenseman for this team going into training camp.
DailyFaceoff.com right now. Jared Tenorti, second-line pair with Connor Murphy. Jared Tenorti. All right. Sure. Why not?
Jared Tenorti wasn't good enough for a Rangers team that was actively trying to lose. That's how dedicated the Blackhawks are to losing, that they saw a guy who wasn't good enough to be on a team actively trying to lose and said, we want that guy. The Blackhawks were an atrocity last year, and they did it on purpose. They wanted the generational talent. Bedard should be good. The books all think he's going to have a solid rookie season. And the thing that why you're inclined to think he'll have at least a good counting stat season, he's not going to be expected to do anything defensively because the team is going to be a disaster defensively regardless. So he could finish with 65, 70 points, 30 goals, and be a minus 15 and still hit a lot of benchmarks. He'll win the Calder. But I expect this Blackhawks team to be atrocious again. 72 seems kind of high for just one player.
I agree.
This isn't a Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon type guy. He's a goal scorer. He's not going to make the guys around him significantly better through a facilitating or playmaking role, which that's the kind of guy you need at first overall if they're going to really change the fortune of a team. The Blackhawks are probably in the same boat. They win between 25 and 33, 34 games. They hang around a little bit more maybe. Bedard has a couple moments of magic, but this team stinks. I mean, other than Seth Jones, none of those 5 guys are NHL defensemen. He's the only one who could be an NHL defenseman on an actual team that's trying to compete. And he's probably a second pair guy on a team that's genuinely trying to compete. The Blackhawks still and they have no goaltending either.
No.
Which they had 7 different goalies last year.
Yeah, I haven't watched enough of Connor Bedard to definitively say he's not a two-way player or he can't adapt to that at the NHL level. Like we talked about before, like, listen, I work at basketball, I watch the NHL, like I can't be out here watching like college games and junior like I don't have time for that. So I don't know. I trust the scouts to watch them, and he was a first overall pick for a reason. We'll see how he plays and we'll see how he adapts at the NHL level. The thing about the Chicago Blackhawks is that they have Connor Bedard, they have Taylor Hall, and that is the end of the sentence.
You could put Seth Jones in that sentence. Seth Jones is
in terms of forwards. In terms of forwards, that's all they got.
But that's it.
That's it. Lucas Reichel looked okay in Chicago. Like, he played 20 some odd games with Chicago. He had a decent amount of points. Like, he looked like he was an up and coming player for them. We'll see how he plays. Daily Faceoff right now has him listed as the first line left right wing alongside Taylor Hall and Connor Bedard. So that could be a dangerous first line. The problem for Chicago is that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. They signed Nick Foligno to a $4 million deal because they needed to get to the cap floor. Okay, he's going to be there. He's going to be a warm body in the lineup. Corey Perry, same thing. Ryan Donato maybe does some things occasionally. Like, Colin Blackwell is supposedly a third-line player for this team, which is a massive problem. And like that should tell you all you need to know. Colin Blackwell on a good team is the 12th, 13th forward.
Yeah.
That, like, if he's your depth player, that's a really good team. If he's your third line player, we got issues. This team is going nowhere fast. And okay, if you want to argue that Connor Bedard might score 5 goals a game because he doesn't have to play defense and all he is tasked with doing is scoring goals, and they can score 7 goals a game, that's fine. They're still going to lose games 8-7 because they don't have goaltending. They're playing Jared Tenorti on the second pair, a guy who, like you said, he was so bad he couldn't even crack the Rangers roster at the time that they were trying to lose. That's how bad he was. And you added Nikita Zaitsev, who also he's a human being that's alive. That's sure. And you have Peter Mrazek in net, who was awful last year, and he also can't stay healthy. So as soon as come December, the wheels are going to fall apart again for Chicago. And they're in for another long season. They don't have Kane, they don't have Taves. They're both out, they're done. And right now it's a lot of the waiting game in Chicago. I am taking the under on that point total every single day of the week.
72 is a lot for a team that, won 26 games last year and added a handful of players. Like, they did not turn over a significant portion of the roster. They still haven't addressed the defense or the goaltending. And that's what kills bad teams, is if you don't have a goaltender who can flirt with a 900 save percentage, you're going to lose every game. You are going to get murdered because you have no defense and you're setting your goalie, who isn't that good to begin with, up for failure. There is no path to the Blackhawks have the opportunity to maybe be a little fun, like entertaining to watch, but they're not a good hockey team.
No. They're a fun team to watch in terms of, like, they're a really good team to fall asleep to, because, like, that game is just going to never end, because there's going to be so many goals, so many stoppages of play, that by the time the game is over, you are fast asleep. That's a really good game to kind of, like, wind down the night with. That's a good nightcap, because that game is going to be mayhem from beginning to end. And for better or for worse, it's going to be a fun watch. Is that going to be a good watch? You be the judge of that, but it's going to be a fun watch.
Okay, let's move along now. We've got the Arizona Coyotes, who a lot of people are kind of starting to talk themselves into as, like, heading in the right direction. And I can see the beginnings of a vision. Like, Clayton Keller was over a point per game last year. Nick Schmaltz was really solid. They had a guy, what's his name? Matthias McKelly was a Calder in the Calder conversation. Juuso Valimaki they got for free from Calgary, and he looks like he's a decent NHL player. They're going in the right direction. We know they have 1 million draft picks in every draft for the next 10 years because they just keep using their cap space to money launder for other teams. They're doing the rebuild as agonizingly slow as possible, and I can't say it's not working, because, like, this is the peril of doing the serious long-term rebuild, is there's no real, like, benchmark end of line where the Coyotes can just keep doing this indefinitely. Like, they traded Jacob Chikrin, Chikrin's a good hockey player. Like, in an ideal world, if you were really starting to build up and, like, you were going to be a serious team this year that wanted to flirt with a playoff spot, you would have did everything in your power to keep Chikrin last year. If he doesn't want to stay, you can't make him stay, obviously, but you had team control, because he still had, I believe, 2 more years of restricted free agency before he could go to UFA. You rake him over it. You make him play out those last 2 years, unless if you're really trying to get somewhere. I do think eventually the Coyotes are going to have to start, like, trying to win and spending money, but until then, they're interesting-ish. Like, Clayton Keller's okay. Schmaltz is okay. The goaltending situation, God bless whoever's in that net, because that team doesn't play any defense. But, again, the Coyotes are in a similar position to the Blackhawks, where they're at least a year or 2 away from, in my mind, being ready to be a playoff team. Probably 2, realistically, because they only have a handful of forwards who are NHL-caliber players.
They're not going to make the playoffs, but they're at least not going to be as bad as they have been.
Yes.
I like the direction in which they're going. The issue,
and they'll have Logan Cooley this year. I forgot to mention that.
The issue with Arizona is that we've said this before, where, hey, we like the direction of this team, and then as soon as we say that, something happens, and then everything falls apart again. I hesitate to put in hope into the Coyotes, because, like, I don't want to be like, oh, hey, this could be something, and then 6 months later, everything falls apart. Like, I don't want that to happen. It's happened in Arizona before. I want to see Arizona succeed at a certain point, because you can't just keep losing for 30 years. And at a certain point, you have to start winning games. Like, this is a team that might not make the playoffs, but they are going to be a potentially scary team to play, especially maybe like after the deadline, when they have not when. Maybe they're like light sellers at the deadline. Like, they won't really sell everybody, but they'll sell off a couple of pieces here and there to maybe get some draft capital for that upcoming draft. They're going to be one of those teams that you don't really want to play, because they're going to have a lot of young good talent that has nothing to lose. Like, they're going to be one of those teams that steal points away from maybe the Flames, or maybe one of those other teams that need every single point they can get up until the last game of the season. And the Coyotes are going to be a scary team to play come that time, because, again, like, their roster isn't bad. It's not good enough, I feel like, to make the playoffs, but just if they stay on this trajectory, if they keep adding instead of, subtracting every season, they're on to something.
I agree with you in that respect that as these young guys actually start to make their lineup, of as the young guys start to matriculate up from whatever junior league or whatever college they're playing at, like Logan Cooley should be a pretty good NHL player out of the box on opening night. Like Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller, that's already more talent than the Coyotes have had in a couple of years. Just those two forwards alone. And then they added Kerfoot, they brought Bukestad back, they got Zucker in there. They got pros. And that has value in terms of just not being god awful. Like you said, they're not going to be great this year, but at the very least, they'll steal games from decent teams because they have enough guys who know how to play at this level. And the young guys, to your point, they don't know any better. We can play with these guys. Why not? Why can't we?
They're going to be a great spoiler team. That's what this is what this Coyotes team is built for.
That's a good estimation. Like we said, the forward group is decent. And we forgot they signed Matt Dumba as well. But Matt Dumba's effectiveness at this point, I think he's probably a third pair, second pair guy more so than a first pair. But they're getting there. And they got Sean Druzy from the Kings and that salary dump. That's another. These are NHL caliber players as opposed to the island of misfit toys that the Coyotes have usually had the last couple of years, where you think about some of the guys where you had like Andrew Ladd out there after the Islanders dumped him out there. They're getting there. They keep weaponizing their cap space, which is the best thing you can do as an NHL team when you're rebuilding. They're heading in the right direction. It's just eventually they're going to have to be a bit more aggressive about that direction.
It's looking good. If they continue to go down this path, they instead of adding guys that can't play anymore or guys that are just not capable of contributing positively at the NHL level, Sean Durzi, all these guys, like these are players that can play at the NHL level and can do good things at the NHL level. It's not these aren't just NHL creative players that for some reason were making a bunch of money and Arizona had the cap space to make it happen. These are guys that teams needed to get rid of because of the money, but also they're good players.
They're useful players. They won't be awful. And real quick, they were 28, 40, and 14 last year, had 70 points. They were over under 76.5. That feels like a goal. I feel like that's a reasonable team goal. You want to if the Coyotes can get 80 standings points this year, that's a good season for them.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think I'm taking the over on that. 76 kind of seems low. They're not going to break it by too much. They're not going to, they're not going to hit 95. But I feel like 80, maybe 84 for them isn't out of the realm of possibility.
That'd be a good season for them. We can move along to the St. Louis Blues, and I titled this section "The Run Is Over." And real quick before we get into it, 37, 38, and 7 at last year, 81 standings points. Their over/under total is 86.5. They traded Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly in season last year. They, for some reason, claimed Kasperi Kapanen off of waivers and took all that money on. They traded for Kevin Hayes. They still have that Binnington contract they can't do anything with. They don't have a backup goalie with a long track record because Thomas Greiss retired, and they're done. That they won their cup. They're on the back end of that. As that group that won that cup keeps getting older and aging out and moving on. That's Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou's team. They can maybe flirt with 85, 90 points, but this team is not very good.
This is my Super Bowl because this is the team that Pavel Buchnevich is on. You see, now I have the runway. I'm talking about my favorite player of all time, Pavel Buchnevich. No, but like, I am a little bit higher on the Blues than you are. I don't like their goaltending. Jordan Binnington is a guy that likes to fight people instead of actually doing his job. I'm not a fan of the way he acts. I'm not a fan of the way he actually plays the game of hockey. He had a very good Stanley Cup playoff stretch, and no one's gonna take that away from him. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and do it either. Like, for that Stanley Cup from January to June of that Stanley Cup win, he had a miraculous run. He was awesome. Yeah. Since that point, very mediocre. Like, we have to be as truthful, as objective as we can be on this show. That's what the show is. He had a phenomenal run. He got paid off of that run, and last season he was awful. He was awful last season. It it wasn't even a situation where he was iffy and like he had some moment. He was just bad.
Awful.
And he kept crying every game. Like it was, I don't get what his goal is with that kind of thing, because like if you do it every night or every week or whatever, it's gonna get old. At a certain point, that kind of attitude gets old. I understand the thought process of trying to rile your team up and trying to be that kind of aggressor on the team, but if you're the goalie and you do that kind of that show every night, it's gonna get old, man. Like you gotta just play your position at a certain point. And if you cried just a little bit less and stopped a little bit more pucks, maybe the Blues wouldn't have sold last year. But that's neither here nor there. I do like their overall roster. I do like Jake Neighbors. I like Robert Thomas. I like Jordan Kyrou. I like Alexei Torpachenko. Like these are guys that are up and coming. Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou got paid this summer. They are stars on the Blues. Pavel Buchnevich is still a star. Like that first line is really scary. Buch, Robert Thomas, or Jordan Kyrou is a very scary first line. Definitely. I like their depth. Brandon Saad and Jake Neighbors, like we talked about. Kevin Hayes, Rangers legend Sammy Blais back on the team, and for some reason he's okay at hockey again. I don't know what they're feeding them, what he's getting fed down in St. Louis. Maybe Nick, but he's back to at least playing hockey as opposed to whatever he was doing up here in New York. Like this is a team that is a little. I don't like their blue line. Colton Parayko is kind of a little broken at this point. Like he hasn't looked good lately. Nick Leddy's getting paid a lot of money to do things. Torrey Krug, kind of same thing. He's not.
He's been very hurt.
He's not healthy. He's not a healthy player. And Justin Falk rounds out the top four. That's a problem. That's a massive problem for St. Louis. I'm a fan of their offense. Their offense is pretty good. Like there's not a whole lot of holes within that depth core. Their blue line is where I have the massive issue, and of course their goaltending.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's a decent forward group. The defense is not great. Craig Berube's a decent coach. They kind of folded at one point. Like we all remember that, where Berube said at one point in like February, "Yeah, we just don't have it this year. This team doesn't have any fight." And like he admitted that on the record, and that's a crazy thing to say for a coach who's been as good a coach as he has for a long time. Maybe he can get something out of this group that's more than the talent would allow. Because on paper, this is a decent forward group, but it's probably the fourth best in this division. And if you're flirting with 90 points, you probably got to get to 95 if you want to be that other wild card in the Western Conference. So the 86.5, it's an interesting number. It's definitely something I can see an argument from both sides. Real quick, because I want to make fun of Binnington. 27 and 6, 894, 331 against, 88th in goals saved above expected, -6.5. He was god awful last year. And like to your point about just it becomes hollow when you are very clearly doing it for performative reasons and not because you genuinely are acting like this. No one thinks Jordan Binnington is a tough guy. Nobody is intimidated by Jordan Binnington. Like, at the very least, when Ryan Reeves does it, it's like, oh, that man could kill me with his bare hands if he tried to.
That's right.
Jordan Binnington could not kill a lot of people with his bare hands. Maybe a 10th grader, but that's all I got on Jordan Binnington.
The best way I can describe Jordan Binnington is he's the dog that barks the loudest because he has no teeth. That's kind of the best way, because with somebody like Ryan Reeves, like, we know his hockey ability is not, up there with the greats, but he's such a big guy that you're genuinely afraid of skidding near him because he can decapitate you at any moment. Jordan Binnington, that's the end of the sentence. Jordan Binnington, like, that's all I can say. Like, I don't like it's. He's a guy that loves to say a whole lot and likes to flail his arms and then do nothing about it. It's great.
Let's move along to the Nashville Predators, who for the first time in the history of their organization have a new general manager in Barry Trotz. They hired Andrew Brunette to be the head coach. They brought in Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen, Goose Nyquist, Cody Glass, and Alex Carrier. They bought out Matt Duchene. They have a goalie who's been a Vezina top 5, top 6 guy for 3 years in a row now. UC Saros, outstanding once again. That team was a lot more competitive than it should have been after the trade deadline because a lot of young guys with nothing to lose and UC Saros were out there. This is a decent team, nothing more, nothing less.
UC Saros is one of the best players on the planet right now, and we both listed him in our top 20 when we did that list. The Predators will go as far as he'll take them. He might just do his best Lundqvist impression and just single-handedly drag into the playoffs because that's how good he is as a goalie. There's a lot of holes on this team. I don't like their bottom 6 that much. Their blue line is okay. I still got Roman Josi. They got Luke Shen. Okay, like fine. You know, the Matthias Ekholm departure is massive because he played such a crucial role for them, and also he was really good for Edmonton when they got him. So they're gonna miss Matthias Ekholm. They didn't replace him with anybody. Luke Shen, all the love to him in the world, my man's is not Matthias Ekholm. Like that's just not how it goes. So. This is a team that, I'm not sure where the vision is. I want to know, if I ask, I want to ask Barry Trotz what he sees the timeline for this team being. They signed Ryan O'Reilly. They signed Dennis Gurianov. Like, that's great and all, but where are the Predators in 3 to 5 years? What is the timeline for this team? Because this is a roster to me that would have it looks as if what was the David Poile. This looks like a David Poile built team. Of we're going to fill as many holes as we can. We're going to plug and play, try to make the first round of the playoffs, and then do it all over again. I'm very confused as to what they are trying to accomplish here. Because this is not a great team. It's not a bad team. They have a good chance of making the playoffs because UC Saros is so good and Roman Josi is so good. But I don't see what Barry Trotz is seeing. I just don't.
So what I will say in response to that, I think the problem for Nashville is, other than Askarov, they don't really have any prospects waiting in the wings to seize these opportunities. And they can't just bring in warm bodies. Like, they're not in a situation like Chicago, Arizona, other teams that aren't as good to just get whoever in there. Because Nashville, they really need their attendance. They don't have a great TV deal. They need people in that arena. They need that first-round playoff series. That matters a lot to that organization. And it's why they've brought in a lot of these stopgap guys, because they do need to turn over a lot of the roster, because I agree with you. There isn't really a vision here. This is a lot of stopgaps. This is a lot of, oh, I remember Ryan O'Reilly on the Blues. Yeah, I'll go to the Preds game, or I'll watch the Preds tonight. I want to see what they look like, because they don't have anyone waiting in the wings to kind of be excited about. They need to hold. This is a holding pattern until they can start bringing in new prospects and Barry can start turning this roster over into something he wants. Because they didn't need to buy out Matt Duchene. They did it for a specific reason. And that tells me Barry feels he needs to turn over the roster and start making it in his vision. Why he got Ryan O'Reilly, when they got Shen, Gurianov. That's why I think they've done a lot of this stopgap stuff. Is Barry realizes there aren't any great prospects waiting in the wings to come in. So we got to fill this lineup out for now. And then we can trade some of these guys and get draft picks. We can draft our guys that we value. And that's really what this is about. This is a transition year for the Predators, year one of Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette.
I want to see what they do. And again, I would like to... I want to just see what Barry has in store for this team, because this is a strangely built roster. And I understand when you take over a team that was already strangely built to begin with, it's not easy to then just make it not strange, a year in, or I think it's 3 months or however long he's officially been in the role. It's not easy to completely overturn the roster that quickly. So from that perspective, it makes sense why this roster still feels like a David Poile team, and maybe sooner rather than later, a lot of that will be changed. But looking at the roster currently, and hey, we have hockey to play in a month from now. Like, there's going to be hockey soon. I have no idea where to place this team. Like, UC Saros could have a 930 save percentage, and the Preds could genuinely finish top 3. Or he can have like a 915 save percentage, and the rest of the Predators are just average, and maybe they squeak in or they miss. Like, this is a strange team all the way around, and I don't really know what their ceiling is because I don't know what their floor is.
They went 42, 32, and 8 last year. Their over-under total is 88.5. They had 92 last year. This team is more talented than the one after the deadline. The vision, the highest possible outcome, the best outcome for them, on your point about Saros having a really good, like a 930-ish save percentage, like a 10, 15 goals saved above expected. And Brunette gets this offense going to a degree that he uses Roman Josi to facilitate a lot of this, that they are able to score a lot more than they have the last couple of years. They were a very defensive-oriented team for a lot of the last, I would say, decade almost. You think about some of the great guys they've had on that back end, whether you're talking Weber, Subban, Ryan Ellis when he was at his apex, Ekholm. They've had a really good defensive core for a lot of that franchise's recent history. So maybe they shifted the focus a little bit more towards offense, being a little bit more risky. Because you think about that Brunette Florida team that won the President's Trophy 2 years ago. They played at one of the fastest tempos ever in the stat tracking era. A ridiculous amount of volume, lots of up and down track meet style. Maybe Nashville opens it up a little bit more. They rely on their defensive talent as opposed to structure, and they're able to get a little bit more offense. Saros is able to mask a lot of those defensive issues because they're focusing on offense so much. The Predators can be anywhere from 6th in this division to 3rd in this division. I think that's not out of the realm of possibility, especially depending what happens in Minnesota and Winnipeg for different reasons. But they don't really have a direction right now. That's the note I think we should end on the Predators.
Exactly. I don't know where they're going, and I don't think they know right now anyway. They might have some idea maybe down the road of what they want to do, but as of September 4th, 2023, I don't think they know either. Like, because this is just a messy roster. I don't know what they think is their plan moving forward, because I don't have a good read on this team. This is a very strange team. Very strange team.
Speaking of strange teams, there's a Winnipeg who, like, at the beginning of the summer, everybody assumed was just going to entirely blow it up because Dubois said he wanted out. The assumption was Hellebuck in a walk year would be on his way out. They overexceeded expectations last year. Everybody kind of assumed year one of Rick Bowness would be an absolute disaster because of how Rick Bowness's tenure in Dallas ended. They got lucky, frankly. The Flames gave them that last playoff spot last year. Those two teams had the worst last month of the season imaginable. They spent the entire last month hot potatoing that last playoff spot back and forth. The Jets made the playoffs with 95 points. Calgary finished with 91. They played each other twice in the last 3 weeks. If the Flames win those games, they make the playoffs instead of Winnipeg. Their over-under total is 91.5. They traded Pierre-Luc Dubois. They got, in return, Gabe Viardi, Rasmus Kapari, Alex Iafallo. They bought out Ranger Blake Wheeler. They brought in Colin DeLeo. They brought back Vladimir Mesnikov and Laurent Brossoit. They extended Morgan Barron, and then two of the guys they got from LA, and Logan Stanley got an extension. Connor Hellebuck, 1 year remaining, $6.16 million remaining. Hellebuck was outstanding once again last year, 37, 25, and 2, 920 save percentage, 249 goals against, 33 goals saved above expected, which was 4th in the entire league. Hellebuck has one of the most unsung, underappreciated runs of anybody in the league, just because Winnipeg just doesn't. Winnipeg not winning the Stanley Cup in 2018 is probably the apex of that franchise since it went back to Winnipeg. Like, that team that lost to Vegas in the conference finals, that's one of the best teams of the last 10, 15 years, that Calgary team that didn't end up winning. But that's really all they have to show for that entire Hellebuck's entire track record, because he's been outstanding year after year. And they just, at best, this team is probably a first-round exit. You think about how matched they were against Vegas last year in the first round.
I really like their what they got for Dubois.
Yes.
I said this at the time. I've said this, when we talked about the LA team during the Pacific Division. I'll say it again. Like, I think Winnipeg won this trade because of how much they got for Dubois. Not that Dubois is a bad player. He's a solid player. He's going to do very well in LA. But the sheer talent they got in return for Dubois makes Winnipeg, to me, the winner of this trade. I really like Velarde and Iafallo. I want to see how Kupari does in Winnipeg. This is that was a real win for them. Dubois wanted out, and they got a lot of talent in return. I like that trade for Winnipeg. With that being said, I don't know where this team goes because we don't know where Hellbuck's going.
Correct.
We have no idea. Like, the first line, Connor, Scheifele, and Ehlers is still a dynamic, very dangerous and very scary line to play against. That second line is, according to Daily Faceoff, is going to be Cole Perfetti, Velarde, and Iafallo. That could be a really dangerous team as well if they get their chemistry going. Like, the third line, the fourth line, like, they have depth. Offensively, this is still a solid team that could explode for a lot of goals. The biggest question mark I have is, okay, well, who's going to be in net? Because if it's Laurent Brossoit taking up 50, 55 games, they got a problem.
Yeah.
Because not like Brossoit obviously is not Connor Hellbuck, and he could try all he wants, but Connor Hellbuck is one of the best goalies on the planet. Like, it's very difficult to replicate that kind of standing on your head at all times that Connor Hellbuck has tried to do for Winnipeg for a few years now. Like, I don't know where this team goes because I don't know where Hellbuck is going to play. If he somehow turns around and says, fine, I'll give it one more shot, but I'm walking at the end of the season, then maybe he puts up some crazy numbers because he is up for a contract and he wants to show up for the payday and all these things. And maybe he carries the Winnipeg Jets to 100 points and has a 940 save. Like, there's a lot of question marks surrounding this team that I nor the Winnipeg Jets right now have answers to. I don't know what to make of this team. They're solid offensively. I like what they're doing defensively. They don't. Besides Josh Morrissey, they don't have a second star on that team to really kind of scare other teams to the core. But I like what they're doing enough that I'm not worried about their blue line too much. So if I'm not worried about their offense, I'm not worried about their defense. This is a team that could do really good things. We just don't know what their goal situation is going to look like.
So 2 more things on the Jets before we move on. Number 1, in addition to Hellbuck, Scheifele is also a pending unrestricted free agent after this season. He is somebody that few different teams have been linked to at various points this offseason, where if the Jets opt for that path, where if they're going to trade Hellbuck, they obviously need to trade Scheifele. And then the other point I wanted to make, Rick Bowness had a good first 4 months in Winnipeg, and then February hit, and they really started to be like, oh, he's playing every game to be, let's get to overtime and try and win in overtime. Because they are not very aggressive defensively. They are trying to mask a lot of their forwards' defensive deficiencies. Like, Mark Scheifele is pretty bad defensively. Blake Wheeler was pretty bad defensively for them last year. So they've really emphasized defense. Like we were talking about before when we were talking about Rick Bowness in Dallas. They really, really lost way too many games in overtime. And at the end, in a third period, because they were turtling. Winnipeg, if they play that way, is not going to be able to score enough because they've got a lot of they've got a lot of guys, but they don't really have a ton of dynamic. Like, Kyle Connor's a very good player. He can flirt with 35, 40 goals. Scheifele is giving you empty calorie offense because he's not playing any defense. They're not a bad team by any stretch. I think they have a good chance to do exactly what they did last year as long as Connor Hellbuck is still there. But Gabe Viardi, I follow Perfetti. I've liked Perfetti's game for a long time. I want to see if he's going to get a real opportunity. Their bottom 6 is not great. And like you said, their defense, it's okay. If Logan Stanley's not an everyday player, I like it a little bit more because he's atrocious defensively. He's really only out there because he's tall. Like, we make that joke a lot. But he was a first-round pick because he's 6'7".
Yep.
There's no other reason he's in the NHL. But this team entirely hinges on Hellbuck, just like Nashville entirely hinges on Saros. Those are 2 teams in very similar positions.
100%.
Next on our list, we get to the Minnesota Wild, who 46, 25, and 11, 103 points last season, over under total of 97.5. They lost in round one to Dallas. Kaprizov only played 67 games. Philip Gustafson stole that job from Marc-Andre Fleury and kind of saved them last year. Matt Boldy emerged as a bona fide goal scorer, had 31 talks, first full season in the league. Ryan Hartman regressed back to the mean. I remember talking during the season preview last year. Both of us were very curious if he'd be able to replicate the close to point per game pace he had the year prior. He only had 40 points last year, so he's probably closer to a 40-point guy than a 70-point guy. The goal scoring has been an issue for them anytime they've come into these playoff series against good teams where they just don't have enough offense aside from the Kaprizov line. They'll be okay. Again, there's more than enough talent on this team to be a playoff team, but I struggle to see them being anything more than a team that can win maybe one round because they don't have enough offense.
I kind of don't know where Minnesota can improve, which is a strange concept to say out loud.
Because they have no cap space, that's why.
They don't have any cap space, but also if you look at the roster,
it's decent.
It's good. This is a scary roster. You know, like they added Pat Maroon, who's going to play fourth line and I guess be the big rig grit hashtag whatever you want to call it. Like if you want to, fine, whatever. At least he can play at an all right level. Like that's fine. Brock Faber could also, be a good defenseman for them. We'll see how he plays. I want to watch him specifically as Minnesota plays this season. I want to see how he does and kind of track him throughout the season. This is a team that has a good blue line. Jared Spurgeon's still one of the most underrated defensemen in the entire league. Such a phenomenal player that doesn't get talked about enough because he's on Minnesota and because he doesn't put up 100 points a season. People don't talk about him, but man, he's an incredible player for Minnesota. And Wild fans, like you really, really, really have to, every day that this man is still on your team, cherish that man. You cherish that. He's a keeper, that guy. But like this is a team that's really good, and then they get to the playoffs. This is such a strange team to me. It seems like every year they make a bunch of noise in the regular season for the past few years now.
Yeah.
Like, man, this is a scary team. They have so much confidence going into the playoffs, and then as soon as the playoffs happen, they fizzle out. What is it about this team that makes that happen? I don't know the answer to that. It's a very strange conundrum that Minnesota has right now. They're such a scary team on paper, and then they're scary to play against in the regular season, and then you play them in a 7-game series, and then you just figure them out. Is it a coaching thing? Is it a team thing? Is it both? Is it neither? Is it just puck luck because hockey is a strange, stupid, silly sport that we all just kind of like and enjoy because we're silly people? Like, it could be all of these things. But bottom line is eventually there has to be some kind of breaking point. And I feel like this is going to be one of them for Minnesota if they don't make a deep run this season. They have the roster to make it happen. But will they is my biggest question.
They've also run into good teams along the way, which has also been the issue where, like, they're not a bad team, but, like, they played Dallas, who went to the conference finals last year. The year before that, they played Vegas, who went to the conference finals. They've had good runs, but they've run into better teams along the way. And that's just the reality when you're down $14 million in cap space. Like, this Wild team should have another 2 good players on it. Like, $14 million in today's NHL, that's 2, like, 60, 70-point forwards at $6.5, $7 million apiece. That's really the issue, that they just aren't deep enough offensively. Because, to your point, this roster is not bad by any stretch, and you still don't know what you have in Marco Rossi, who's had a really long, arduous journey coming back from COVID. Brock Faber has a real opportunity. You see if Matt Boldy can build off what he did last year. Zuccarello doesn't seem like he's going to age as long as he plays with Kaprizov. Ryan Hartman is good enough at being a second fiddle to Kaprizov. The one thing I will note before we move on at the end of the season for them last year was that Kaprizov missed a good 3-4 weeks at that one point and then came into the playoffs with not a lot of time to ramp back up. And he's so much of their offense that being so not up to game speed, it really took him to the 4th or 5th game of that series to kind of look like himself. And by that point, it was already too steep a hill to climb. But real quick, I want to highlight Gustafson had a really good season last year. 22, 9,
Tremendous.
and 7, 908, 285 save, and then 7th in goal save above expected. And he was good in the playoffs. They lost in 5 games, but he was a 921 save, 233 goals against, and 3.5 goals saved in 5 games. Gustafson wasn't the reason they lost in the playoffs. They just didn't score enough.
And that's kind of the whole point of their struggles is they are
For a lot of this.
they're such a scary like we talked about. They're such a scary team in the regular season. They can score at will, and I understand when when your best player is hurt, it's tougher to score goals. I'm completely aware of that. And when he gets back, he's not going to be 100% because he has to get back. And I understand all of that. I get it. Somebody else has to step up. Like your team is good and like, is
Boldy
talented
did
enough.
last year. I will be fair.
Right,
Matt Boldy
like,
filled a lot of that void.
I understand, but like the rest of the team has to step up. It can't just be one guy. It can't just be 2 guys. The rest of the team has to step up as a unit and fill in the gaps. Minnesota did not do that, and they're out. What happens if Kaprizov misses the first 3 games of the playoffs again this season? What happens? Is it going to be the same? Oh, well, we tried, but he's out, so we can't win anymore. GG's go next. Like, no. So, like the team has to step up and fill in the holes. Like if there's a hole in the ship, everybody has to chip in and prevent more water from coming in. Like that's how it works. One guy can't just be standing there for 24 hours a day and holding the hole with his hand. That's not how that works. Like there has to be a more coordinated effort to fill in when people get hurt, when people get injured. And I want to see how Minnesota approaches this season. Because if they flail out again, there's going to be a lot of questions in Minnesota.
Absolutely agreed with you there. They're a good team, but they've never really been great at any point during the last 10, 15 years. Like their peak was a second-round playoff appearance. Next up, we have one of the teams that you and I both have as a legitimate Stanley Cup contender in the Dallas Stars. Last year, 41, 21, and 14, 108 standing points. 103.5 was their over-under. They lost to Vegas in the conference finals in 6 games. Jake Ottinger really worn down after the most starts he had ever made in any season in his hockey career. In the playoffs, he was a true liability. They're an ascending group for the most part, with some caveats to that. If Joe Pavelski keeps playing like this, I will say he doesn't count as old. Jamie Benn had his best season in 6 years last year. He was close to a point per game. Tyler Seguin had his best regular season in a number of years. They are an ascending team. They were able to add Matt Duchene because he got bought out by Nashville. They added Craig Smith. They signed Ty Dellandrea. The biggest complaint that you and I, we've said this for a long time. The biggest issue we both have with the Stars is that Ryan Suter played the second most minutes of any defenseman on that team. Other than that, there's a lot to like. You think about how good Wyatt Johnston was for them last year. Part of the reason Jamie Benn had such a good season. Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz really arrived last year. Robertson over 40 goals. Rupe Hintz over 70 points. That's a really good hockey team. And the biggest reason I think they really could have won the Stanley Cup last year if Jake Ottinger weren't so worn out by the time they got to the conference finals.
Jason Robertson is a disgusting hockey player, and I mean that in the best way possible. I mean, he is just disgusting. He's so good. Jason Robertson is such an outstanding player. He is one of he's such a dynamic player too, and like he's been in the league 6 minutes. Like he's fresh to the league and he is dominating. He's so much fun to watch. Every single Stars game is enjoyable. The rest of the team is really good, don't get me wrong, but Jason Robertson takes it to a whole nother level. I love watching Jason Robertson play hockey. I love watching every second of him on the ice. He's always doing something positive on the ice. It's just such a joy to watch him play. The rest of the team isn't that bad either, especially now they got Matt Duchene in the mix for free. Nashville was like, all right, well, see you later. Matt Duchene's like, what? I had no idea. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I can't believe you've done this. And then Dallas goes and says, hey, by the way, we're a Stanley Cup contender, and we'd like to have you. That's what they did. And like they're a good team. They're a really, really solid team. You said it. Why is Ryan Suter playing top 2 minutes? Why? He is so slow. he can't defend anymore. Surely someone in Dallas management sees that. Surely. Because everybody else on the planet sees it. The fans see it. People that aren't Stars fans see it. We're out here in New York. We're not Stars fans. We see it as clear as day. Ryan Suter can't play hockey anymore. Why is he getting top 2 minutes? Someone explain that. Like, what kind of blackmail does Ryan Suter have on the Stars management? Like, I get it. He's a likable guy. You don't, just because he's likable doesn't mean that you have to give him top 2 minutes. Miro Heiskanen is a phenomenal player. And allegedly, according to dailyfaceoff.com, his projected partner is Ryan Suter. I need to give Miro Heiskanen a hug. He deserves it.
They need Thomas Harley to usurp Ryan Suter in their depth chart, and that will have a twofold effect of A, Harley being better, which will help the team, and 2, Ryan Suter playing lower in the lineup will help him. On Ottinger, last year in the regular season, 37-11-11, 919 save percentage, 237 goals against, 8th in goals saved above expected, 21.6. In the playoffs, 10-9, 895 save percentage, 306 goals against, and then negative 7.39 goals saved above expected. He started 62 games in the regular season. That was the most he started of any season in his career, because this was a college hockey guy. The college hockey season's only 30-something games. He didn't play in a junior league where you have a 60, 70-game season. The workload management problem for these young goalies who really click and really catch fire is something the NHL has yet to adapt to. We talked about this a lot last year in the Pacific, last week, about the Pacific Division, where you think about Stuart Skinner, Phoenix Copley, Aiden Hill, guys who'd never started more than 40, 50 games in a season prior to this past season, and then they got worn down over the course of that season. So I'll be very curious to see how Dallas tries to manage that situation this season, if they're going to try and reduce his workload or find a workload that's more conducive.
Give friend of the show, Scott Wedgwood, more starts. That's there you go. That's the solution to all of this.
Hey, if it gets Jake Ottinger to be more effective in the playoffs, like I said, they could have beat Vegas in the playoff in the cup. They could have won the Stanley Cup last year if they had better goaltending. The goaltending for them was the issue, and Suter was atrocious in the playoffs. In that Vegas series, he was an atrocity. Frankly, Vegas just made mincemeat out of him. But Vegas has an argument for one of the best top 9s in the entire league. You look at this: Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski, Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, Evgeny Dadonov, Mason Marchment, Tyler Seguin, Matt Duchene. That's one of the best top 9s in the entire league. And then you throw in a guy like Miro Heiskanen. You have a goalie in Ottinger who has shown the ability. And think about how good he was in that series against Calgary in the first round 2 years ago, where they got the short end of it and lost in overtime of a Game 7. Jake Ottinger is one of those guys where if he's on, he's one of the 10 best in the league. Now it's just a matter of, okay, let's get into the playoffs healthy, and how long can our old guys keep doing this? That's really the biggest questions for the Stars.
If they can find some way to figure out that Ryan Suter's bad at hockey and replace him with somebody that can't play hockey, I am very afraid of Dallas.
Oh, absolutely. They are a team that is a bona fide Stanley Cup contender. Absolutely.
100%.
Last up, this team, the Stanley Cup champion from 2 seasons ago, the Colorado Avalanche, 51-24-7, 109 standing points. Their over-under total is 106.5. They lost in 7 games in round 1 to Seattle. Does seem like Gabe Landeskog is going to be forced into medical retirement, which is unfortunate. Valerie Nichushkin is supposedly supposed to show up to training camp next month, but we still don't really know what happened at the end of last season, if the NHL is going to impose any type of discipline over that entire situation, or frankly what his future is with the organization. Alexander Georgiev is a full-time starter last year, had a really solid season, 40-16-6, 918 save percentage, 2.5 goals against, 12th in goals saved above expected. They've still got 3 of the 20 best players in the entire league. They traded for Ross Colton and gave him a 4-year deal for $4 million per year. They traded for Ryan Johansson, who they got at 50% retained. They signed Miles Wood for 6 years at $2.5 million per year. They signed Jonathan Drouin. They extended Bowen Byram. This is a very good team. I'm just curious if the decline or aging process for their older players will be what holds them back. You think they're still got three guys that in McKinnon, McCarr, and Rantanen, three guys in their prime. Can those guys carry enough of the load for this supporting cast? That's really the biggest question because the supporting cast is not great. You're talking Druin, Lehkonen, Johansson, Logan O'Connell,
Miles Wood for some reason.
Ross Colton, Cogliano, Chris Wagner. Like, there just is not as much depth on this team as the team that won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago.
I would, at this point, make a very compelling argument that Dallas is a much scarier team than Colorado. And I say that with all the love in the world to McKinnon and Rantanen and those guys. Like, I love them, and I think they're outstanding players, and I love their blue line is, besides Jack Johnson, obviously, is incredible. Like, I'm a big fan of 5 of their 6 defensemen. I think their blue line, for the most part, is outstanding. The problem with Colorado now, their offseason, what are they doing? That to me was very strange. They gave Miles Wood a long-term contract. They gave Ross Colton a long-term contract. They added Jonathan Drouin, sure. Ryan Johansson could be something for Colorado, sure. I don't like their bottom 6 at all, really. Like, Cogliano is still a good fourth-line player, and he's not my concern there. But I don't see where their offense is going to come from the bottom 6 at all. Ross Colton can score occasionally. That's kind of it. Like, I don't like their bottom 6. I'm not a huge fan of the moves that they've made coming into this upcoming season. They have such great star talent. Makar and Taves and McKinnon and Rantanen. They have these superstar generational players, but this season they're surrounding them with Miles Wood and Ross Colton. That's it. Did I miss the Drager tweet of more better top players that Joe Sakic signed? Like, is that it feels like the puzzle isn't finished. But they are. This is it. This is the team. Unless Joe Sakic has something, up his sleeve that we're not aware of. Maybe there's a big trade. I don't know. But, like, as currently constructed, this feels like something that is unfinished. But this is finished. And I don't get it.
They're going to be asking their defense to do a lot of work to mask the problems of this forward group. And if Bowen Byram's healthy, if Sam Girard is healthy, they've got, like you said, probably the best 1 through 5 of any team in the league on the back end. They're going to be able to do a lot in terms of driving possession, suppressing chances against. Makar is the best defenseman in the world. Taves is like the 7th or 8th best defenseman in the world. Bowen Byram and Sam Girard are really good drivers of possession from the back end. Josh Manson is good at suppressing chances against. It's simply a matter of when they get into a playoff series, can their best players carry more of the load? Because they are going to have to run a shorter bench. They're going to ask their best players to do more work in those close games. I think I'm inclined to agree with you that I think Dallas is probably better than them overall because Dallas's third line is significantly better and Ottinger's better than Georgiev. So that's where I'm at. Colorado will make the playoffs. If they get hot, they absolutely can win the Stanley Cup because if Makar goes for, 34 points in 25 games, if McKinnon goes for 30-something points in 25 games, they definitely have the upside, but I think Dallas is probably a safer proposition because they're a deeper team.
I like Dallas a lot more. I really like the way that they're structured. I like their trajectory. I like the way they're built. Colorado still has very young, by the way, young superstars, and they could play for a long time. The way that they are built as of September 4th, 2023, I just don't see how they play better than Dallas, maybe even better than Minnesota. Like, this is a team that's going to make the playoffs. They're going to do some damage. I just don't like their ceiling. I think Dallas's ceiling is higher. Maybe Minnesota's ceiling is higher if they could figure out how to play in the playoffs. That would be neato. That would be cool of them to do. With Colorado, I don't know how deep they could get with the roster they currently have.
Completely agreed with you. Okay, it's time for our 4 preview questions. Who wins the division?
I think Dallas.
Okay. I will agree with you. It's not fun. We did the same thing last week where we both picked Edmonton to win the division. But yeah, I think Dallas wins this division. How many teams from this division make the playoffs?
That very much hinges on Winnipeg and Nashville. And that's a cop-out answer. I don't know where Hellebuck is going to play.
Yes.
So I can't answer. Like, Winnipeg is a black hole right now. I have no idea what they're going to do because I don't know what their best player is, like where he's going to play 3 months from now. I have no idea. Nashville is another kind of like iffy team of like if Saros can do his best Lundqvist impression, then make it. If he plays well, but not like Dominic Hasek level well, they don't make it either. I don't know. I'm gonna say tentatively 3, maybe 4 if Winnipeg or Nashville figure it out.
Sammy Blais over 8.5 goals.
Over.
Yeah, he had 9 in 31 games last year after the deadline. And then our last question. Who will have more points? Pavel Buchnevich or Blake Wheeler, Barclay Goodrow, and Jimmy Vesey combined?
If I speak, I will get in trouble, so I will not speak.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's going to be close. Buchnevich can get to 75, 80 points.
Yeah.
Wheeler had 50-something last year. Gaudreau had 20-something, and Vesey had 20-something. This will be close.
I'm just gonna avoid the question because I don't. If you get me, if you see, you're like I'm the wind-up toy, and you are just cranking. You're cranking it, and let me tell you something, Nick. You're not gonna get away with it. I'm just gonna be an adult about it, and I'm gonna say next week we will reconvene.
Okay. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Liberty Blue Podcast. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on YouTube as well, at Liberty Blue Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Got content dropping pretty frequently. We'll see you guys next week. We're going to hit the Atlantic Division, which is kind of bad. Frankly, the Atlantic Division looks really bad on paper, so it'll be an interesting conversation. We'll talk to you guys then. Summer's over. Today's Labor Day. I'm sad.
Hockey soon. That's
all we got.
We're getting football's on Thursday. Football's back. We're getting sports. Oh, it's great. It's great.
All right.
Soon is going to be Windows Open season.
Yes.
Soon. Oh, I can't wait.
Fresh air is very nice. All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Later.